Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kids4Kids webinar series, celebrating 10 years of empowering kids. I'm Mabel C. This webinar is the last one in the year of 2020. In the past few months, we've explored some important topics. We've talked about creativity thinking and entrepreneurship, finding and living your passion. We've talked about building resilience in life. And today, we're going to talk about another very important topic on cultural intelligence and empathy, which is closely related to reducing inequality, a core value we advocate through our work at Kids4Kids. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker, Equal Opportunities Officer, Devi Novianti, on stage. Hi, Devi.
Hi, how are you, Mabel? Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with everyone on the line.
It's very good to have you here today, especially to explore such a very important topic for us. And I think I'm going to first start by asking you to tell us about yourself. Where were you born? What is your cultural background?
So, what do you think, Mabel? If I ask you, like from my name, where do you think I came from? What do you think I came from?
I think it sounds like an Italian name because of your family name. Am I right?
No, I'm Indonesian. So my mom and dad give me a name Novianti because I was born in November, so that they think they might forget my birthday. So like, let's put them, put this little girl Novianti so that they will remember my birthday, November. Oh. So yeah, so it's actually very simple reason. So I am Indonesian. I'm a mom of two. I moved to Hong Kong in 1995. So my former husband, he's Chinese, Hong Kong Chinese, and he's been away from Hong Kong for a long time. So in 1995, he said like, oh, let's move back to Hong Kong because of before the handover. And I would like to live in Hong Kong. And at that time I was never live abroad. So I was so excited, like, hey, finally living in a different country, but I'm terrified at the same time because my English was really, I never speak in English at all in everyday basis because I'm educated in Indonesia, I live in Indonesia for my entire life. And also I'm, and I don't speak Cantonese. And then it's true, like I remember the sense of isolations when I moved to Hong Kong. Like if anyone asks me, like how long I've been in Hong Kong, I can answer precisely 1 year, 3 months, and 2 weeks.
How long have you been in Hong Kong now?
So now 25 years. So now I've been here 25 years. Hong Kong grew on me and I love Hong Kong and I'm still loving it. So I'm really pleased that I have an opportunity actually to live in Hong Kong and have an experience of living in amazing city like Hong Kong. So that's my story.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. I think it's actually a very interesting topic to talk about culture, especially in Hong Kong. We have lots of different kinds of cultures. And like a global city that we live in. And today, the discussion is rather serious. You're talking about cultural intelligence, which is a very new term. But before we get into that term, I want to ask you another question about empathy, because this is something that everybody can relate to. What do you think of empathy? What is empathy? And also, why is it so important for us to have empathy and also for the society to have empathy?
Great. So that's a great question because I believe that cultural intelligence and empathy is actually quite similar. It's just a different spectrum. So I'm a really big fan of Brené Brown. If you have watched her little video, 4 minutes video about empathy. So, but for me, the way I interpret it, make it simple, is that the ability for us to take in and to acknowledge other people's feelings and emotions and perspective without judgment. So it is very important because we don't live in a jungle, we don't live in a mountain by ourselves. So every day we are interact with other people. And if you think about it, like, would you be friend with someone who, like, let's say if you are having a difficulties and you says like, oh my God, I have really bad day, you know, like I fail my test. I mean, would you more likely to be friend with someone who says like, yeah, I get you. Yeah, I understand. Or someone like, well, it doesn't matter. You know, there's another test next time. You can do better next time, right? So you will be more inclined to be friend with a person who has empathy, a big empathy skill. People probably will say, it's like, okay, can I help you? You know, how can I help you with? And, you know, I understand, and things like that. Or just simple, I get you. Now, this is a very important skill because in the young age, this is a base on human relationship. And as I mentioned, we live in a community where, you know, like we have peer, we have teacher, we have, when we go to work, we have colleague, we have, you know, our leaders and things like that. And our relationship with them will help us in terms of our, you know, finishing our tasks, our duties, if we have teamwork. So that's really, really influential. And also, if we are having an empathy, like we have more friends, it's good for our mental well-being. I saw you have one of your core things is about mental well-being, because people just wants to be part of your life. People want to be your friend. People like to be with you. So that's for personal capacity. And for leadership, it's become one part of the essential skills for leader as well. So for young people who watch this and wants to be leader in the future, this is actually one part of essential skill, a leadership skill, because, you know, like even though we are become a CEO of big company, but people that make the company work is still people. You know, like we don't have 100% machines yet. It's still a combination of people and robot or AI. So it is very important for us to be able to take on other people's perspective, other people's emotions without judgment, and take an actions upon it. So that's my small take of like why empathy is important.
Definitely. And you mentioned about, you know, that the world has changed so much. You know, I remember when we were talking about different kinds of intelligences, you know, a long time ago, people were talking about IQ, you know, and so when people were considering whether you're smart or not, you know, they look at your IQ scores, or IQ become such a big thing that everybody is going after. And then some years later, people talking about EQ, you know, your emotional intelligence, and whether you're able to actually, you know, understand people or relate to people and all that. And nowadays, I think CQ, you know, cultural quotient or cultural intelligence, become the talk of the town now.
Yeah.
And why is it so important? Maybe I will ask you to give us a very simple definition first. You know, what is cultural intelligence?
Right. So cultural intelligence is just something that I believe that something start to be the topic of discussion in 2003 with Professor Earle and Aung San with his book Cultural Intelligence. I don't think in Hong Kong we talk about it as much, but I picked this topic or this term personally because, you know, like sometimes people talk about cultural sensitivity. But then it means like, oh, you have to be sensitive with other people. Maybe other people is overly sensitive, you know, like then you have these notions about like, I'm not, you know, like I am sensitive enough, because then it's actually very, it's very subjective, right? But everyone wants to be intelligent. Like you want to have emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence. By all means, it's actually very important. It means the ability to work in different culture effectively. So for instance, like let's say someone's been exchange student or get transferred to work in a different country, and have to work with like a group of women. Like, you know, yesterday 25th is actually International Day for Elimination Violence Against Women. So let's say, you know, go to different country and work with supposed to be a woman, a vulnerable woman, right? But then a person who might not have the cultural intelligence thinkings like, yeah, because we have to empower women, the men have to see that women have to speak up and they can speak up and they have their own mind, blah, 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 blah. And then possibly like set up a group meeting with men and women. So would women be speak up during that meeting? Possibly not. And therefore, the meeting will not be as effective in a way to, let's say, gather information, for instance, on what the woman's experiencing in that country. So cultural intelligence is the ability, again, quite similar, the ability to look into different culture without judgment, right? But then without judgment, and take appropriate actions in order to achieve whatever goals that we are there in the first place. So if this person who's traveling across the sea want to find out what's the woman's idea, or what the issue is, maybe the best way is that, like, make a meeting just for women, or make a talk to one by one. And the same thing, I think it's with the company setting, for instance, or in a group setting, because some women might be introvert and they don't want to speak openly, and they don't want to raise their opinion openly, maybe as a leader. And if you are sensitive, or you have a cultural intelligence, like, people can come with a different diverse background, diverse way of being, then a leader might just say, okay, maybe for this person, maybe I make sure that everyone have time to answer question by me asking everyone for their feedback, or maybe have an individual meeting. So I think having this cultural intelligence, it's really important for everyone, because then it will help us to grow, and it will help us in our career, because now everyone work with, like, with the Zoom, with the technology, we travel everywhere. And, who knows, 2-3 years from now, we might be working in a different country. So having that ability, I think it's very useful and very important these days.
I really like the comment that you made, that it's not just aware of different cultures, but you actually take actions, to reflect that you are aware of it. I think that's a very nice point, because everything actually has to become an action, to be able to actually realize the importance of it, and also to advocate or to embrace, diversity. But, as human beings, we all have biases. Yeah. I have a lot of biases myself too, that maybe not as obvious as other people, or other people have biases that are less obvious than mine. But how do we form those biases, and also how do we avoid them?
So we have a biases that we know. We have a biases that we don't know. That's what we call unconscious bias. And this is the way our brain works, because our brain just categorize everything in the boxes, so that it's easy when we need to retrieve an information. So let's say, like, if I say, Devi, I'm from Indonesia, I'm sure in many of listener here, they will have Devi Indonesia, hashtag Bali, hashtag, hashtag domestic workers, hashtag Muslim, hashtag. And because then you actually withdraw all this compartment with Indonesian, all that it's bring into surface. So this is actually something that happened to everyone. The key is, like, what do you do with that informations? Now, the unconscious bias is something different, because we don't know it's there, and sometimes we don't recognize it, and everyone is guilty for it if we don't really recognize it. So, for instance, like, let's say in nowadays community, right? Like, we are so bombarded with the beauty, the beauty image that have to be with fair skin, right? So that's why all this whitening cream become very popular, because then people subconsciously, unconsciously thinking they have to be have a fair skin to be beautiful. So this is the thing. So I think one of the way for us to recognize it is that to actually recognize that's not true. You can ask yourself, is that true? Like, I went to hairdresser a couple of years ago, and hairdresser used to be a woman professions, right? Cutting hair, and a chef normally is a female profession in the old days, and now male entering that professions. So I have a female hairdresser, and then the first thing that come to me, and I said like, oh my God, can she actually cut my hair? And then I have to like slap myself like, Devi, come on, of course she can cut your hair, you know, like so. So this is the thing. So I think, again, going back is that, you know, like being recognized that we all have biases. It's just because of this is how our brain works. And maybe what we can do is to go branch out and talk and get to know people from different culture, and actually confront those biases, whether that's true, whether we think this is true, or what our perception and assumption is true. So that's how we combat our biases. So meet more people, talk to more people, no judgment, travel, you know, that kind of things. I think that will help. Yeah.
That's very true. And let's talk about a rather sensitive question about Hong Kong. You've been in Hong Kong for 25 years.
Yeah.
And have you had any personal experience of being sort of the victim of racism? Do you feel that racism is a serious problem in Hong Kong? Or have you had any personal experiences of that kind of experience?
Right. So I moved here 25 years ago. I think compared to 25 years ago when I moved in, like I moved to Hong Kong, it's much better. Because I remember in the beginning when I moved to Hong Kong, I went to shop, no one will serve me, like seriously. Like I have to stand in the shop, and like I have to attract people attentions because I was not, because of my skin color, people make assumptions that I'm a domestic worker, and the assumption of domestic workers, the unconscious, the bias of domestic workers, they will not have money to pay. So maybe the sales lady will think, or salesperson thinks like, why will I bother my energy to serve this person? But now I think it's much more better, even though it's not all entirely eliminated. But I remember like a couple of years ago, I'm looking for, it's actually it's a long time ago, but this is something that I remember. 8 years ago when I looked, okay, best example, maybe change. Okay, I took a taxi and I said to taxi driver, I would like to go to North Point. I was used to live in North Point, and then taxi driver said, okay. And I said, oh, can we go to Times Square, Ngai? And then taxi driver say, okay. And then I cannot change my mind. And I says, North Point, Ngai. And then I go back to Times Square, Ngai. And the taxi driver says to me in Cantonese, I speak a little bit of Cantonese, and he said like, Dim Gaya, you find okay, why you don't want to go home? Home, are you bored? And I'm Indonesian. We talk to our taxi driver, like in Indonesia. So the first thing when we go enter taxi, we said, hey, how are you? Do you have a busy day? It's just very common. So when the taxi driver asked me like, hi, are you bored? And, you know, without thinking, after work, no brain, I just say yes. And then the taxi driver said to me this, oh, moyan pule ya. Mo pule la. No one care for you. Let me care for you. Like, I don't think I have to face this treatment if I am not this skin color, right? So again, the taxi driver have a different assumptions of me, even though I come home from work with, you know, office work, and this is what he said to me. So this is my experience. So I still have that. This is a couple of years ago, but I received this, so people say sometimes like, oh, you know what, like the more higher your economic status, then you will not receive discriminations. The stereotyping is there, is still there. So it doesn't really matter which level are you in. Sometimes, so in a way, I think that there's a way that we need to do more in terms of promoting racial equality and giving an exposure. So maybe this taxi driver, in his unconscious bias, only know brown skinned person must be domestic worker. So he doesn't know anyone else that actually brown skinned person can be a professional, can be anything. And even though if I am a domestic worker. He should not say all those things, you know? So again, then there is this assumptions like maybe I'm a man, I am, you know, better suited, I can say whatever I say, and a woman should not say anything. So in terms of racial, you know, and discrimination and harassment, I think we still have a way to go, even though I don't think if we compare like US and things like that, I think we are much better. And compared 25 years ago, I think we are much better. Yeah.
Much better, yeah. And as you roll, you know, like you work in the Equal Opportunities Commission, you know, you see a certain group of people or a certain category of people living in Hong Kong actually suffer the most, or, you know, have the hardest time, you know, facing this kind of prejudice in Hong Kong.
So we did a survey, racially acceptance survey a long time ago. And what we found is that the darkest a person's skin, the lower acceptance by the community. And the lighter your skin color, and your acceptance is much higher in the community. So that's that. So it doesn't mean it doesn't go to the race. It just, you know, it just anyone with a darker skin. But then, you know, like then if you think about let's say the darkest skinned people in Hong Kong is the African, so they face lots of issues in Hong Kong. So one day we have a webinar with one female representative from HSBC, and she said, like, you know, when I am in America, at least I don't have problem in renting a house, but here, because of my skin color, I have a difficulties in renting the house because, again, of this biases that people have against the Black community in Hong Kong. So that's one of the story that I've heard.
Yeah, well, I hope that we're going to improve more and more, you know, as the day goes by. And it actually leads to my next question. I think a lot of things actually goes back to our own understanding, and also how we could improve ourselves, you know, like if every individual starts thinking about these things and also be more aware, then as a whole, you know, the society will become better, right? So my question to you is, you know, how can we actually develop our cultural competency? You know, how do we actually get more intelligent culturally?
Right. So I have a slide that I prepare. So number one is, I think we have to understand that we are the same, but we are different. So we are part of this human species. As a human person, we would like to be respected, we would like to be happy, we would like to live in safety. All these things are the same. But then we have other attributes. We might have a different color, we might have a different ability, we might have a different, you know, wish and things like that. And I think we have to recognize people come from, people have a different shape and different dreams and things like that. And so we are the same, but we are different. And having a respect towards these differences and recognize these differences, I think it's one of the key things. The second things that that I think is important is that be open-minded and no judgment, because sometimes we feel like, oh, my way is the best way, my way is, you know, your way is wrong. But actually, it's just about, you know, people brought up in a certain way of living, and people probably doesn't know that there is a different way. But if we are be open and we are always like find out, and we don't have any judgment, and we just say, okay, please, can you explain to me why you're doing such a way and things like that, then we develop this understanding, and we be able to do things accordingly. But then if we have a judgment like, oh, that's wrong, that's bad, then immediately we create a separation, because then we like, this is us, we are the best, we are the most, you know, we are the most top of the level of whatever we think, and then other people are lower than, lesser than us. So that's the no judgment. The third things that I want to say is be curious and ask questions, because if you look at children play with each other. They just, like ask like, oh, like why is this and how is this, and they just be very open. They don't have this barrier that separate them. They don't have the concept that you are different than us, you and in group or out group. So what if we can actually be curious and ask questions? So anything that we don't know, we go to, like in my example, we want to go to this country where a woman are not supposed to speak, or different countries, and we actually curious and ask question. Okay, how does it works? Blah 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 blah. No one expect us to know 100% of everything of your different culture, but being open and and willingness to ask questions, that will help us a lot. And the fourth things that I would like to ask is that make an adjustment whenever required. So with all this information, with all this knowledge, if we sit on it, then it's not useful. But if we are making an adjustment, because the idea is for us to be work effectively, if it is in a group, so we can relate effectively, and whatever purpose that we have, we can achieve it effectively, then actually that's what's required. So I think this is all from me, but the main thing is to understand that we all the same, we wish the same, and we are the same but different, and there's nothing good or bad about being different or being the same, but maybe we'll be open and more open to get to know each other better, and to see us as human being, basically.
That's really a very good insight and a reminder. And to your point about be curious and also ask questions, I think it's precisely what we need to do, especially, when we're young. We want to meet more people and understand what their lives is about, And this is when I'm going to invite our second speaker, Alpha, to come on stage. And hi, Alpha. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thanks.
It's really nice to have you with us today to share about this topic and your experience as well. I think I'll start by asking you to introduce yourself again. Tell us about yourself and also tell us about your connection with Kids4Kids.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Alpha, and I'm currently a year 11 student studying at Chinese International School. So apart from my interests in music, sports, and global issues, a key part of my personality is that I'm quite passionate about striving to better society and engender positive social change. And this passion actually goes back as early as year 6, and I've organized countless projects and events to raise awareness on several prevalent issues in our status quo. So my relationship for Kids4Kids started with me going to a Powered by You forum back in 2018, where on the second day I pitched my AFAC project idea and successfully got the support of Kids4Kids in both funding and mentorship aspects. And more recently, I decided to join the Kids4Kids Advocates leadership team because I firmly believe in the educational approach of service learning, which is where I'm able to benefit the community whilst improving and learning new skills alongside like-minded people.
Yeah, we're definitely very happy to have you on board our leadership team this year. And also, Alpha, you mentioned about the AFAC project, and for the audience, understanding AFAC is Action for a Cause, which is one of the key youth programs in Kids4Kids. And tell us about your project. I know that you have a special project that you did with a special group of people as well. Can you tell us about it?
So my project highlights on the deaf population of Hong Kong, and it originated after I spotted an intriguing newspaper article highlighting the tribulations suffered by the deaf on a daily basis in Hong Kong. And from this article, I was so moved, and I was so moved that I decided to do something in order to raise awareness on this pervading problem. So after pitching my idea and receiving the support of Kids4Kids, I then organized a large-scale event, Sing With Your Hearts, at the Forest, a shopping mall in Mong Kok, in April of 2019, which reached a few hundred citizens, encompassing a plethora of performances by different deaf groups. And the performances of the event ranged from sign language songs to dancing to playing musical instruments. And many famous songs were chosen to be performed with the intention that the public would be drawn in by these songs and ergo be more interested to watch our performances, simultaneously being able to learn more about the difficulties that the deaf population in Hong Kong faces. As the event, I also taught around 20 plus children how to do the sign language to some songs. And apart from performing at these events, when festivals such as Christmas and Easter came along, I also taught them how to sign to festive songs, which they then performed to around 300 people. Furthermore, for my event, I successfully managed to attain wide media coverage, as well as have the chairperson of the Equal Opportunities Commission, founder of Kids4Kids, as well as a representative from the Hong Kong Society of the Deaf attend my event.
That was really amazing. You know, like when you did this project, you were 13 years old and you are now 15. Yeah. So that was actually some major achievement, you know, the really, really good achievement. Tell us about what did this experience teach you, or how did it actually change you about the perception of the world, or about the people that you serve, and also about yourself?
So ultimately, firstly, on an individual level, this experience enabled me to develop many key skills, such as in the areas of project management, communication, as well as perseverance. So firstly, regarding collaboration and communication, in the few months leading up to the event, I actually had to communicate and actively reach out to different stakeholders in order for the project to be successfully implemented and actually take place. A few examples include me having to secure the venue, as well as different performance groups, as well as the guests of honor. I also had to recruit a sign language choir and teach them sign language. So in this regard, I feel that I've improved significantly as at such a young age. These skills are actually quite essential in the long term. Secondly, regarding perseverance, this links to the third main thing I learned from this experience, which is also that the key of leadership is to enable your team to be able to properly visualize the mission and the end goal and possess empathy while preparing for the project and preparing for the event. So one of my key weaknesses is procrastination and being able to prioritize well. So as I falsely believed that I still had a lot of time to prepare for the event, I didn't realize the importance of the situation until one day I was helping the sign language choir practice their performance. During the practice session, one of the parents of the children came up to me and told me that their daughter was incredibly excited to learn the sign language songs that I was teaching and very excited to perform at the actual event, and that she also practiced all the time at home. It was only then that I managed to realize how important and how much this project meant to the children, the parents, as well as the community. And if I look at it from a wider lens, if I failed at an exam, it would only impact myself and as well as my grades. But however, conversely, if I failed in this project, I would also disappoint the people who had trusted me, as well as fail to raise awareness on the unequal situation of the deaf population in Hong Kong, as well as the importance of sign language, which was the whole point and the whole intention of what I wanted to do when I organized this event. So hence, I made efforts to change my work habits, and all this time, I managed to keep in mind this very important end goal. This process actually managed to be an incredibly great example of cooperation between deaf and non-deaf groups working together. As well, and lastly, throughout the entire process, I was successfully able to comprehend the meaning of empathy and implement it into my event's positive results.
Yeah, well, you mentioned about empathy, you know, like, and Devi also mentioned about empathy. And as a very young person like yourself, you know, 15 years old, why do you think that's a very important character for you growing up?
As Devi had already characterized with her definition of empathy, I feel that empathy is the definition, and empathy essentially is placing ourselves into the shoes of others. And without empathy, both ourselves as well as the person we are failing to empathize with will actually be impinged, as we will go about our lives not considering what the other people we have failed to empathize with are feeling or experiencing. And this actually might lead to very impetuous decisions being carried out due to these kind of erroneous and unwarranted assumptions. And with empathy, often others we empathize with will be able to feel valued, and that we actually really perceive their unique and special situation. So specifically regarding why this is incredibly important for children growing up at a young age, empathy is eminently pivotal to success in the long term due to benefits gathered and garnered from a strong sense of empathy, including but not limited to helping them forge unassailable and stable relationships with others, consolidating a healthy learning environment within school or within friend groups, stimulating acceptance of others, which actually leads to less instances where ostracism and bullying transpire, as well as strengthening mental health.
That's really nice, that you had all these reflections. I want to ask you a rather personal question. So you talk about empathic, and also understanding what other people's needs are. Is there someone in your life or in your circle that actually teaches you kindness? Who is that person?
So I actually look up to my mother, but more broadly, my parents as a whole, in regards to kindness and empathy, as well as other matters. I believe a huge part of learning to be able to properly cultivate empathy is to get to know like the other people, get to know others, and get to know others and put ourselves in their shoes. And from a very young age, my parents have ingrained this in my mindset of how I view the world, by providing me with the rare opportunity and privilege to provide assistance to those marginalized in community. Several examples being giving food to elderly in Shamshui Po, as well as other areas in New Territories, as well as cleaning staff on the streets. And from these multifarious experiences, I've held the virtues of kindness, compassion, as well as empathy with everything I do. So I feel that they've really inspired me and taught me in this regard.
Thank you very much for your sharing. I'd like to bring Debbie back on board. So I want to ask you the same question, Devi. Who is the kind of person that you know in your life and who actually influences you?
It's actually my grandfather who already passed away. My grandfather taught me about kindness, but also taught me about being assertive. So my grandfather is possibly the one person that I know that tried not to impose himself and always help other people and things like that. So I just look at my grandfather, and because I used to live with my grandfather for like the first 4 years of my life. So I saw him as my role model. And I remember like one day when I was young, I was eating in a restaurant and I saw a little girl outside the restaurant, watching me eating. And at that time, I can't remember, but this is my earliest memory. I just stopped eating and I share my noodle bowls, split it into two, ask for new bowl, and then I give it to the little girl outside the window. So, I think parents have my parents also have a really big role, like Alpha mentions, in terms of like encouraging, maybe other parent might choose to say like, oh, don't worry, don't bother, and things like that. But my parents, it's encouraging in it. It's just like, yeah, just be kind, you share. You have enough food. If you want to share. So, yeah, that's it.
That's a very nice sharing. I know, Elsa, you have some questions that you are prepared to ask Devi. And at this point, before you ask your questions, I also would like to invite the audience. If you have any questions for Devi or for Alpha, you can use the Q&A box to put in your questions, and then we'll come to your question later. So Alpha, what do you want to ask Devi?
So I really wanted to ask Devi, how should we actually promote empathy and cultural intelligence in home and as well as school environments?
Okay, Alpha, first of all, I would like to say you are such an inspiring person for doing all these things when you are 13. So thanks for the good work of Kids4Kids to organize these actions empowered by youth. And I will always be, I'm very happy every time I get invitation to speak. So going back to your questions, empathy is, again, the same as we mentioned earlier. It started with our parents, like other people, parents to say, it's like, okay, can you feel more, like, oh, it's so sad. Like, do you feel how sad this person is and things like that. But then for, like for a teenager or people us that brought up that we are now we are now in adulthood or nearly adulthood, then I think what we need to do is, I don't know whether this is something that possible whether this is something that's been taught in the school, but maybe do more, expose ourselves to people that less fortunate, people who are, experiencing challenges, and having a group discussions. It can be a just group discussion, because for instance, like this in my work, we are trying to promote opportunities for employment for ethnic minorities. And one of the things, strategy that we think of, like we ask companies, because the company doesn't want to hire ethnic minority, and we ask why. And this is part of the empathy. Because we want to know what is the perspective. Why is that? They feel it's difficult to hire ethnic minority. So we ask the company, why is that? And then the company says that, oh, we don't know. Again, like they say, it's like, oh, we don't know if we're going for the meal, for instance, whether we have to speak in English during all the meal, or we have to, how we decide where we go, because maybe some ethnic minority, they don't eat pork, some ethnic minority doesn't eat beef, and so this is something that then we start creating a program, a training, a workshop for a different company to say, it's like, hey, you know what? If you are imagining, if you are that person going to another countries, and like, how do you feel if this has happened? So we create a different workshop in terms of unconscious bias and things like that, because we are using our empathy that, the company are worried, the company are nervous on how they manage because they don't have any experience before, to bridge the gap so that our ethnic minority can get employment in Hong Kong, can have better opportunities in Hong Kong. So going back to your questions is that be curious, be open, expose ourselves to different culture, expose ourselves to a different story, and remember that this is not because we need to be good, we need to, this is a virtue, but this is actually good for us and our personal growth and our career. So it's actually self-serving as well. It's not about doing good for the community, but it's also doing good for us. I think people need to remember that, and maybe more motivations to be more culturally intelligent, cultural competence, and have more empathy for people around us. I hope that's answered your question, Alpha. And thank you for that.
Yeah, most certainly did. Thank you for your insightful opinion.
Is that all you want to ask?
Sorry. So another question
I'll give you
I would
one more
like to
chance.
ask. Yeah, sure. So sometimes we have empathy, but we don't know how to communicate it effectively. So what kind of suggestions do you have for us to be able to start communicating with empathy?
So my personal take on this is this, right? Like, people might have a difficulties, a challenge, a pain or suffering. But also, like we really don't know how to express this. Like, we want to tell these people that we understand. Sometimes people think like, no, you don't understand, right? So for me, I normally say, yes, I get you, right? I get you. It means that it can be anything, but I get the story. I get you. And normally I will ask myself, like, how much should I say in these circumstances? Because sometimes people, when they are in pain, they just want someone to listen, for instance. So there is no fixed rule for everything, set rule for everything. But then I will ask different situations that I find myself in, and I will ask, okay, how much should I say in these circumstances? Will I just have to be actually listening to this person is actually better, or this person needs something else from me? Like, okay, maybe, maybe would she welcome a hug? Maybe if she welcomed me holding her hand, and things like that. So yeah, it doesn't have to be verbal all the time. So you just have to be aware of what's required at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think listening is actually a very understated skill.
Yeah.
You know, that when you want people to actually feel you understand them, a lot of times it's not because you say something, it's actually you listen to them.
True.
Yeah. And you mentioned about self-awareness, which is actually a question from the audience. So the question is, what is the relationship between cultural intelligence and self-awareness? And how do we actually become more aware of the cultures around us?
Okay, so first of all, I think we have to be aware of like what's our culture is and what's not. So you know, we have our own self-awareness on how we do things and how we react to certain things. So for instance, like in unconscious bias, what we normally tell people is like every time we have a jerk reactions and we make decisions like this, then you have to think, okay, what is this? Like, because then this is something that comes from our unconsciously, maybe something in the past, and it just comes in the surface, like, and then normally I will ask like, okay, can we actually go back and then ask ourselves why we come to a conclusion. So one example, I have discussion with my colleague, because most of the, you know, like sometimes we do get like, we invite people to speak in a different venue. So, you know, like every time we decided like, yeah, this is yes, this is good, this is yes, this is good. So we think that doesn't work, because then it's actually our unconscious bias, because then why this is good, why this is bad. So when we are selecting something, then we started to having the awareness of what we are trying to create out of that event. For instance, okay, we want someone who are a good speaker, who are able to convey this message, who have this experience. So we don't make a decision based on our knee-jerk reaction. Oh, I know that person will be good. You know, that's, you know, like that's a positive affirmative bias. Or, but then, okay, so yes, this is what we want to achieve. So who will be good for this person? So yeah, awareness is good. Aware what you are required, aware what are you trying to achieve, what we are trying to achieve. And with that, then we can start asking questions, going back again of asking questions. What's the best suited person for this, and what the best things that we need to do in these certain circumstances.
Certainly helps for us to pause, you know, or maybe go back a few steps, you know, and think about things. You know. We're going to come back to you later. At this point, I'd like to invite our board of director, Anita Leung, to come on stage to share with us. Anita, please.
Hi, thank you, Mabel. Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking your time today to attend this webinar. And thank you, Devi and Alpha, for sharing your passion and experience in developing the cultural intelligence and empathy. We all know that although Hong Kong is a largely homogeneous society with over like 90% being ethnically Chinese, we do actually have a very large group of non-Chinese living in Hong Kong. For example, I've read about the 2016 population by census. There were at that time actually over 580,000 non-Chinese living in Hong Kong at that time. And I don't have any figure for this year, but certainly, I mean, we are having many more now than back in 2016. So we are so grateful to have you, Devi, with us today to give us some tips on how to develop cultural intelligence so that we can all live together in harmony, no matter whether you are what we call the local Hong Kong Chinese, or a Chinese from mainland China, or a member from the ethnic minority group. And I especially like one of the points you made, Devi, in your slide, saying that we have to recognize that we are all part of the human species, but we are also very different from each other. Because your comment actually reminds me of a saying in Chinese, and I'm sure many of you today may have heard of it, and that is, I'm going to say in Chinese, 若要人似我，除非兩個我。 meaning that if you wish others to think and act like you need to actually clone yourself and make another you. So I think which is exactly the point. I mean, so no two persons can be identical, and we really have to, understand each other to live in harmony. So basically going back to really understanding the cultural diversity and developing the empathy is what I think is the foundation for fostering the social harmony in a society, especially a society like Hong Kong. And as you, Devi, has said, be open-minded and don't judge, because we are also tempted to judge others without really understanding their backgrounds, their feelings, and their reasons for doing certain things. So we just jump into, judgment and say that, oh, this is really bad. I mean, I don't like him, so all sorts of sort of bias. So I think we have to overcome our own bias and try to stand in other people's shoes in order to make Hong Kong a really socially inclusive and compassionate society. And I think this is particularly important during the pandemic because I've heard stories of many people that they are really experiencing the loneliness, the hopelessness. So they are really feeling hopeless. So I think we should really all set aside our prejudice and eliminate the racial discrimination, or what, Devi, you said, the skin color discrimination. So it's not to do with the race, but just your skin color. And our discrimination against the ethnic minorities. And we do need to reach out to each other with a helping hand, especially to actually get through this pandemic period. So at Kids4Kids, we have a vision that a future where all young people are empowered to become change makers and to develop social responsibility to make the world a better place. So Arthur, we are so proud of you. And thank you for sharing with us your passion in reducing the inequality for the deaf. Because the deaf community, as you said, is a section of the population which has often been ignored by many people in Hong Kong. And I think having a physical challenge is not unique to any particular race or any person with a particular cultural background. And we have seen, how you have bridged the gap between different sectors of the population by promoting the sign languages to primary school students and to the public at large. And I think you have done a fantastic job in doing that. And we hope that with Arthur's experience, you can all be encouraged to develop your own empathy in tackling different social issues in the society. And each year, Kids4Kids support students like Arthur to care for the community by taking action. And students are encouraged to send in their own project ideas under the theme of environment, mental well-being and health, reducing inequality, and tackling poverty through education. So throughout the 6 months, students will have a chance to learn more about social issues, develop empathy for others, and become change makers in the real world. And Kids4Kids will support them with seed funding and mentorship throughout the whole journey. So in the year of 2020 to 2021, we are supporting 24 community projects led by students, and you can definitely be a part of this journey too. With a donation of 3,000 Hong Kong dollars, you can support one team to carry out their Action for a Cause project. And to donate, all you need to do is to scan this QR code on this slide or go to our website, kids4kids.org.hk/donations. And we hope you can join us and our students in building a community filled with empathy. And I would like to thank you all in advance for your generosity. So I will now pass the time back to Mabel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anita. And before we introduce the next webinar, I would like to invite Devi and Alfred to be back on stage, because I know, Alfred, you're going to teach us some sign language that you've learned during your project time. So off to you. What do you want to teach us today?
So I'm going to teach 2 phrases. The first phrase is don't give up, and the second phrase is tomorrow will be better. So let's learn how to do don't give up first. So firstly, curl your hands together into 2 fists and place them in the area in front of your right shoulder. Then fling the two fists towards the left side of your waist. And in the process, you open your fists. And lastly, perform sort of a no action with your hands. And these two actions together mean don't give up in sign language. So the second phrase is that tomorrow will be better. So firstly, place the second finger of your right hand on your right temple like this. Then turn it around and place it in front of your face like this kind of motion. This is the sign of the word tomorrow. After that, with your two hands, undergo a circular motion in front of your chest, which signs the word will. After a while, break out from this circular motion, and with your right hand, form a thumbs up symbol and throw it out a few times, which signs the phrase be better. So together, it looks like tomorrow will be better.
That's really nice. And really nice, the two phrases that you introduced to us as well. You know, like it's very, very meaningful. Thank you so much. And like Anita said, you know, today we have the privilege to hear your personal sharing and also some of the experiences and insights. And I think I learned a lot from you too. You know, like even Alpha, you're so young, you have all this energy, and then we're so happy again that Kids4Kids have you this year to be on a leadership team, and I hope you will enjoy the experience with us. And Devi as well, you know, you've been a long time collaborator and supporter of Kids4Kids. Thank you very much. And I would like to introduce you to the next webinar. I just said that this webinar is the last one in 2020, but in 2021, in January, we have a very exciting one ready for you. The ingredients of success, and it's going to be featuring two very important speakers again. And Syed Asim Hussain is the founder of Black Sheep Restaurants, and he has a lot to share about the meaning or redefining success, and how do you actually get your team to be successful together, and all the things that he wants to tell us about his business and how he actually motivates his team, and also tell us all the tips that he has. And Avnash Bhavani is actually a very close connection with Kids4Kids. He's one of our alumni, and he spent like 10 years with us. When he was only 12 or 13 years old, he joined our first program. So he's going to be back in January to tell us about his whole experience of growing up and also being a part of Kids4Kids, and also what he thinks about the future waiting for him. So please join us in January. And once again, we thank the two speakers for sharing their experiences with us today. And also thanks to you, our audience, who come to share with us and also learn with us in this webinar. Thank you very much. Goodbye.